Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Dr. Bonnie Garcia, statewide literacy co-director with the California Department of Education. It is an honor to welcome you to part one of a two-part series focused on highlighting strategies to support equitable practices in literacy, California's commitment to Black student success. Literacy is a top priority in California. In 2021, State Superintendent Thurmond announced the campaign to ensure California students are reading by third grade. And today, after years of investments and dedicated work from the state, county offices across the state, districts, and schools across California, we are beginning to see the gains, and we will continue to take large steps forward. Today's webinar is an example of just that. On today's agenda, you will hear from three speakers: Vanessa EGK, State Board Student Member, Dr. Ingrid Roberson, State Chief Deputy Superintendent, Dr. Cynthia Glover Woods, State Board Vice President. We will share California's literacy landscape approach to and our approach to literacy and biliteracy. We'll also spend the majority of our time with two bright spot districts, Pittsburgh USD and Inglewood USD. Resources and a Q&A will follow. Before we jump in, a quick look at our objectives that will guide our conversation, starting with our landscape and our approach, which will examine key data and trends and explore policies and initiatives that have been driving California's progress. Then we'll spend our time with our bright spot districts who are leading the way in improving literacy outcomes for Black and African American students, strategies that you can take back to your districts. Finally, resources to support your efforts, tools for planning, professional development, and instruction, family engagement to strengthen literacy in your community. Now let's get started, and I am now going to turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Will McGee.
Thank you, Bonnie, and thank you for that nice welcome. And we appreciate you and your team hosting this webinar. And most importantly, we appreciate everyone who is joining us in this webinar and our panelists. So as Bonnie mentioned, my name is William McGee, and I'm the Deputy Superintendent of the Building Educational Success Together branch at the California Department of Education. And on behalf of State Superintendent, we say thank you all for being here. We have an exciting webinar for you all today, and we are interested in really getting your feedback on the topic and then also letting us know about future topics that you would like to learn about, especially pertaining to our Black student achievement. So I am able to forward the next slide. And one of the things that we love to start off with, that I like to start off with when we do webinars or any presentations, are just images of students. Please keep these images of the children in your mind while you are learning today during this webinar, and really focus on why we're here today. State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Tony Thurmond, was sworn in as our 28th Superintendent of California. And Superintendent Thurmond has really led the way in regard to programs and initiatives to support all children in California, especially in support of our Black students. So now I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Vanessa GK, one of our only student state board member at the State Board of Education. Vanessa is going to say a few words to get us framed and grounded today. Vanessa, are you able to turn your camera on and come off of mute?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, Vanessa.
You can go ahead and get started, Vanessa.
Okay, sorry. Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa GK. Thank you so much for having me on this webinar. I proudly serve as a current student board member for the California State Board of Education and as my school's Black Student Union co-president. But most importantly, I'm here today as a Black learner with direct experience of what will be discussed today. Just for some context, my school has around 20 Black students out of 1,000 total students. This demographic breakdown isn't unique to my school. It is a reality for plenty of other schools throughout California. When you are one of a few Black students at school, you become hyper aware of your identity and the space you take up. My community isn't much different. There aren't many of us, so this is pressure to represent. But at the same time, there's rarely any space for Black students to talk about what we're experiencing. I attended a conference last week where I had the great opportunity to share ideas, work, and collaborate with students across the state. One student leader shared with me that they had something at her school called the Dream Center, a space specifically designed for first generation and immigrant students to enter and converse with one another. A space built for them, for them. It reminded me how important it is to meet student needs beyond academics. We cannot expect students to focus on literacy or anything else if their basic needs for belonging and safety aren't met. Resource centers designed for Black students would make an incredible difference on campuses like mine. I also believe that supporting our teachers of color is just as important as supporting our Black students. Out of the approximately 45 teachers that are at my school, only one of them is Black. Throughout my K-12 journey, I've only had one Black teacher, who is my current Black Student Union advisor. They have expressed to me how isolating it feels to be the only Black educator on campus, and nearly all of the Black students call on them as a resource because they're the only one that they can talk to who really understands them. This is why I strongly support state initiatives that address the teacher pipeline crisis. Giving resources and funding to initiatives like recruitment programs for Black teachers encourages students like me to be confident in learning while allowing them to stay their most authentic selves. Just last week, my English literature class finished The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. After reading this novel, for one of the first times, my Black classmates and I felt seen. We felt comfortable sharing our thoughts on it and actually engaging with the text and not just relying on Spark Notes for quizzes. If you don't know, The Bluest Eye is about a young Black girl named Pecola who struggles with navigating internalized racism and beauty standards in her community. My other classmates may have been uncomfortable with some of the topics that were discussed in this book, but I think that it is necessary because there's no denying that when young students see themselves reflected in the literature they learn, and when they see themselves reflected in their teachers, their confidence and love for learning significantly increases. The difference between a disengaged student and an empowered one is often just representation, safety, and someone who believes in us before expecting from us. Black students want to learn. We just sometimes aren't given the resources to empower them to learn. As co-president of my school's Black Student Union, I have been able to bring in nonprofit leaders as guest speakers who give academic opportunities for marginalized students and help them break generational cycles and get into college. Earlier this week, I had the pleasure of hosting and having Deputy Superintendent William McGee come to my school, where he provided excellent resources regarding what the state is doing to bolster Black student achievement and how we as students can get involved locally. These are the kind of things Black students can connect to, the things that stimulate our academic success. And these are the things that we need more of in schools throughout California to support our Black students. Thank you again for allowing me to speak this afternoon.
All right, Vanessa. No, thank you. I don't know if you were able to see the hearts and the claps and all the emojis going on, but powerful speech. And I am so happy to hear that I was able to bring some information of knowledge to your school. That was a great visit. And I will tell you that I was bragging about that visit. Again, that was a highlight for me to come and visit your school. And I appreciate the leadership that you and your students were offering, as well as your teacher, superintendent, and your principal. So great job, and thank you for helping us get grounded in this webinar. Now, to follow up, who was also electrifying, we have one of our chief deputy superintendents, Dr. Ingrid Roberson. Ingrid, are you able to turn your camera on and come off of mute?
Yep, I'm on camera and off mute. Thank you for that, Will. And thank you for that electrifying opening, Vanessa. We're going to have to invite you more often for all of our webinars. I just want to welcome everybody to this series that we're kicking off. It is a year-long series that the California Department of Education is going to engage in for all of 2026. We want to center the Black student experience so that we can achieve Black student success. And so for us at the California Department of Ed, we are taking a focus student approach. So really focusing on a specific student group as a way to look at all of our different services and how we're meeting student group needs here. And so that's what we're going to be doing for 2026. I think under all of the leadership that you're seeing here at CDE, we take seriously that we are a backbone agency. We are the ones that handle curriculum adoption, standards, having instructional materials, all of these different pieces. We've just finished with math adoption, and now we're going to an ELA, ELD follow-up adoption. And so we want to be demonstrating what it is that we're asking our districts, our charter schools to engage in. And so you will see us as a department, as leaders coming together and really taking a look at everything that we do: literacy, math, science, nutrition services, early education, and really, again, centering the Black student experience so that we are achieving Black student success. So while we as a state did get 1.8% growth in English language arts and in mathematics, 2% in science, we know that that is not enough. We need to be able to move the needle even more and really putting out that let us have audacious goals and let us be looking at student group needs. So I'm just really appreciative of CDE staff and all of our guest speakers and panelists to make this happen. And again, this is a series that we're going to engage in throughout the year of 2026 as we ourselves take a look at our own practices, policies, and programming. So with that, I think we have our next speaker from our State Board of Education.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Roberson. And now, yes, we do have another electrifying speaker, Dr. Cynthia Glover Woods. I believe she is going to turn her camera on and come off of mute. She's also electrifying, but Dr. Glover Woods, you have a lot to live up to from Vanessa. So let's see what you could do. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I will not even attempt to live up to those electrifying introductory comments from our state board student member, Vanessa Ejike. She just has really laid the table, if you will. I'm just going to add perhaps some utensils to the table so that we can just jump into this webinar. Just a few framing comments before we get into the meat and potatoes of today. But I do want to first start by thanking State Superintendent Thurman for his commitment to literacy and to Black student achievement, and also to Deputy Superintendent McGee for his dedication and diligent work in this area and his unwavering focus over the years on the academic needs of California's African American and Black students. So I'm going to say some things, and I'm preaching to the choir. I already know this, but what we do know is that literacy for African American students is absolutely critical. It's critical for academic achievement, for economic mobility, and for personal empowerment. And if we know our history, and I know many of you on this webinar do, we do recall that historically there were anti-literacy laws that were used as a means of social control and oppression against enslaved and free Black African Americans. And a lot of times young people may ask, why is that? Why is that? Well, because we know that literacy is indeed the gateway. Literacy is a gateway skill for knowledge in all subjects, and it's also very central in our work to students' post-secondary success and success in their adult lives. It's directly linked to socioeconomic outcomes and is a powerful tool for interrupting cycles of poverty. So when we think of literacy as that foundational space for learning in science and math and civics and other disciplines, what we do know is that when students have a strong sense of literacy and they have strong literacy skills, it fosters a strong sense of self-agency, historical understanding, and civic engagement. One other critical piece when we think of economic mobility is the fact that low literacy is often linked to low wage jobs and jobs that are in danger of being replaced by emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and such as many of the emerging technologies that we see in our day-to-day lives. So as a result, low literacy and lack of literacy skills results in a lack of readiness for post-secondary readiness, which results in underemployment and unemployment that perpetuates cycles of poverty. So when we talk about building strong literacy skills for students, in particular our African American students, we're talking about a game changer for life, not just something that happens in the walls of our classrooms, but something that paves the pathway for them as they leave our schools. What we do know is that effectively developing students' literacy is very complex. It involves explicit and systematic instruction of foundational skills, culturally relevant texts, writing, comprehension, vocabulary, and all of that woven together based on student needs. Literacy challenges that we see experienced by many of our Black students is definitely not a result of their potential or ability to thrive. What we do know is that it's a result of a lack of resources and a lack of effective literacy instruction. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited to be here in the state of California because we have had significant investments to be able to address both of those areas. You're going to hear about quite a number of them, but I just want to point out some facts as far as the monetary investments that have been dedicated to improving literacy for California students. Between the 2018 Budget Act and the 2024 Budget Act, total funding for our schools has increased from 97.2 billion to 137.6 billion. And these investments include investments in programs such as Universal Transitional Kindergarten, which is now where we have an opportunity for all 4-year-olds within our state to have access and opportunity to engage in effective pre-literacy instruction from their early years. Also, there have been investments in programs such as the Expanded Learning Opportunities Program, which provides opportunities for students before, after school, and as well as during the summer. We also had a significant investment in community schools, billions of dollars that have gone to support over 2,500 high poverty schools in providing those whole child wraparound supports. And one of the exciting pieces is that research has been done on the effectiveness of the community schools program and what they have seen, as well as increases in many social areas, is increase in academic achievement, particularly for our students who are English learners and our Black students. Also, there have been investments in things such as teacher preparation and literacy professional development, hiring literacy coaches and reading specialists, providing literacy resources. A lot of time was spent in developing tools that could serve as screeners for students at risk of reading difficulties. And as Chief Deputy Roberson mentioned in her opening, the ELA, ELD follow-up instructional materials adoption, which is underway to provide schools with more research-based instructional materials in the area of reading and literacy. So, friends who are joining us today, I want to say today is a valuable opportunity for great minds to come together, and you will hear great minds from those that are representing the California Department of Education, as well as our partners from Pittsburgh and Inglewood school districts. We will bring those great minds together. We will learn from one another and share best practices. As we engage in today's discussion, we must remember that the needs of Black students deserve particular attention and require an intentional approach. We cannot waver in that. And I'm excited again to be part of the state of California that does not waver away from the intentionality that is needed. This approach requires us to simultaneously be proactive and responsive in our actions. So I leave a couple of thoughts for us as we get ready to jump in. I want to encourage us first to double down on literacy instruction, assessment, and teacher support, particularly at the transitional kindergarten and third grade levels. Those are the grade levels where those foundational literacy skills are built, where students are learning to read so that they can effectively read to learn in language arts as well as all of the other subjects that are critical for their success in adulthood. We want to be sure to utilize those screeners to find out if there are students who are at risk of reading difficulties and be able to intervene early and often to mitigate any issues that may be cropping up for our young people. At the same time, we have to be responsive for students who are already experiencing literacy gaps, for our students who have been identified to have learning disabilities. We want to be sure that we have resources and interventions in place to help fill those gaps and set them up for success as well. In serving our students, it is critical, let me say this again, it is critical that we utilize culturally relevant pedagogy, curriculum, and texts that recognize and leverage our students' cultural knowledge, experiences, and their frames of reference. We also cannot forget or leave out our families and community-based organizations. We can utilize and partner with our community-based organizations to provide print-rich environments in the homes and also provide strategies to embed literacy-based activities into daily living tasks at home. Again, I have to say our parents, families, and community-based organizations are critical to success in this work. Frederick Douglass said, "Once you learn to read, you will be forever free." As educators and advocates for African American and Black students, we must do everything possible to ensure that when they leave our high schools, they achieve that freedom. Freedom academically, freedom economically, freedom socially. And I am confident that those who you will hear in today's webinar, as well as those of you who are joining us via the webinar, are going to be the ones to ensure that that freedom occurs for our students. Thank you so much for allowing me an opportunity to share and speak, and I am getting ready to buckle up my seatbelt and get ready to learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Glover Woods. And no, your words were off the hook as well, and very, very, very inviting. If you did not hear, Dr. Glover Woods gave us a call to action. She said, double down on literacy instruction because learning to read is important so children can then read to learn. So, Dr. Glover Woods, we thank you and the entire State Board of Education and the State Board of Education team because without you all support, it would be tough to do what we do. Thank you. So as Dr. Glover Woods mentioned, Superintendent Thurmond created the Black Student Achievement Task Force, which met. And the Black Student Achievement Task Force was convened, and there were educators, professors, community members, those alike that joined the superintendent and came up with recommendations. We've continued the Black Student Achievement Task Force's platform. And what we've done now is created a platform to really allow our school districts to share resources. As you heard Dr. Glover Woods mention, we're going to be learning today from folk who have done some very, very exciting things. And then the platform is also an opportunity for school districts, community-based organizations to learn about the funding resources that are available to support Black students at your school districts. The platform also supports with legislation and really getting ideas that we can really put forward to the legislature to support Black students. As Dr. Ken Weston has stated, when Black children thrive, all children thrive. So this is not just about Black children, this is about all children, and we want to bring everyone along. The Black Student Achievement Task Force had created 6 recommendations, and out of the 6 recommendations, 4 of them were voted on and approved by the legislature. And you can see the pieces of legislation here. the Senate bills and the Assembly bills, as SB stands for Senate bill, AB stands for Assembly bill. And when these pieces of legislation were passed, some of them came with funding and some of them came with what needed to be done. And so at the Department of Education, we supported with the administration of funding as well as the review and collection of data. And so we are processing some of the data behind these pieces of legislation to see how well they supported with implementing our Black student achievement in the school districts. Here are previous task force recommendations from the Black Student Achievement Task Force. And as you can see, the variety of recommendations, teacher diversity, academic achievement, housing, homelessness, and foster youth, school to prison pipeline, and mental health. These are all things that we champion at the Department of Education, and these are all things that our school districts are doing to really support their Black students and, again, all children. And so you can Google these resources. You can also look at the Department of Education's website, and you can see information about each of these platforms. Proud to say that California supports the National Board Certification. We also have a residency program, and Superintendent Thurman has led and championed a lot of these initiatives to support with not only the recruitment, but the retention of teachers. So what I'll do now is turn it over to Bonnie so she can continue us on our learning. Again, as Dr. Glover Wood said, buckle your seatbelts. You heard from 3 speakers already who have dropped a lot of wisdom and knowledge, and you're going to continue to hear from more. Bonnie, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Will. And thank you, Mrs. EGK, Chief Deputy Superintendent Dr. Roberson and Dr. Glover Woods, for your thoughtful and your encouraging words. It's important to understand California's literacy landscape and for us to really set the foundation for why this conversation, why is it important? Why are we here? Why is it imperative that we work collectively? And you've heard already a number of reasons. So I'm going to go through this next section briefly, but just for grounding purposes. Beginning with data from the CAST, the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, for ELA overall in California. And what we see is that between 24 and 25, California experienced, as Dr. Roberson mentioned, the largest year-to-year increase that we've seen in years, 1.8% points. It's encouraging. However, we know that we're not yet back to pre-pandemic level. And the goal is not just to get back there, but to exceed those levels. When we look across grade levels, we see gains from this, we see overall gains. We also see gains above that of the, we also see gains that above the state average for our 6th and our 7th grade students. For our 4th and 8th grade students, we have gains that were equal. Looks like my scrolling is going by too quickly, but we see gains that are equal to that of the state average for 4th and for 8th graders. And for our 3rd, 5th, and 11th, still gains, but a little bit before that, a little bit below that of the state average. Across the board, we see increases, but still work to do, especially when we're looking at our early grades. Now, when we look across race and ethnicity groups, we also see gains across the board. We see gains above that of the state average for our Black or African American students, with the largest gains, and also for Hispanic or Latino students and Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander. Although it is encouraging to see that our Filipino students have rebounded slightly above that of pre-pandemic, we see that gaps persist, and we must acknowledge that Black and African American students' progress continues to be a concern. For students with disabilities, our foster youth, economically disadvantaged, and homeless students, again, we see increases between 24 and 25 across all subgroups. Our students who are in the foster youth group had the highest gains, averaging about the state average, above that of the state average. But as we see, there are gaps, some wider than others. And across all groups, however, work remains. And it is encouraging to see that our students with disability are slightly above that of the pre-pandemic level. And here to tell us a little bit more and give us more specific data on students with disabilities and a focus on data for Black and African American students with disabilities is Dr. Rachel Heenan, Director of the Special Education Division at the California Department of Education. And I now turn it over to you, Dr. Heenan.
Thank you, Bonnie. And thank you for inviting me to the webinar. So as Bonnie stated, I'm Dr. Rachel Heenan, the Director of the Special Education Division for CDE. And today we'll take a quick look, and I mean very quick look, at our data for students with disabilities across California. We'll start really with the statewide picture, what the numbers tell us about overall identification of students with disabilities in California. And then we'll dive a little bit deeper, but very quickly, into ethnicity-specific data, focusing on 2024 data, so new data, for our African American and Black students, students of color, and other ethnic groups of students with disabilities, to truly better understand where our disparities exist and highlight where progress is being made. So again, our goal is always to use this data to strengthen equity, to improve supports, and ensure that every student with a disability has the opportunity to succeed. So as you're looking at this data, as we look at this 10-year trend of enrollment of students with disabilities from 2014 to 2024, the first thing that stands out is the steady decline in California's overall TK through 12 student enrollment. We've gone from over 6.2 million students in 14-15 to about 5.8 million students today. So that's a loss of about more than 425,000 students across the state in 2 years. But at the same time, the number of students receiving special ed services TK through 12 continues to increase every year. In 2014-15, 647,000 students received special education services, compared to over 832,000 projected this year. And again, this is our TK through 12 population. So even with fewer students overall, more students are being identified and needing support through the special education process. If we look also at the broader birth to 22 population, as we serve our birth to preschool students as well, we see a similar rise from about 718,000 students in 2015 to over 876,000 students this year. So what that tells us is the demand for special ed services is increasing across the entire age span, not just in TK through 12. Next slide, please. So talking about representation or overrepresentation, as we look at this slide, I want to draw our attention specifically to our students of color, our African American and our Hispanic students. While Black students make up 4.9% of California's total student population, they represent 6.85% of students with IEPs. There's also a similar concern with our Hispanic students, who make up 56% of our California student population, but over 60.5% of students with IEPs are Hispanic or Latina. That tells us that African American students and their Hispanic peers continue to be over-identified for special education services compared with their overall enrollment. And the pattern reinforces the need to critically examine how our students are referred, how they're evaluated and supported across our system. Also, when we look across this chart, our African American students stand out as the most disproportionately represented group relative to their population size. So for example, if you look at our Asian students, they represent 12% of our student population, but just 6.8% have IEPs. And white students' representation in special education closely mirrors their overall enrollment. So this contrast may highlight long-standing systemic inequities, issues such as access to early intervention, culturally responsive instruction, and unbiased assessment practices. Again, a focus of our work with our LEAs around disproportionality. And, this data is as a story, and it's not just a story. It has real implications for students' experiences, their opportunity, and long-term outcomes. We know that over-identification influences the pathway students are placed on, the expectations set for them, and the opportunities they receive. And so this data reminds us that our work in California, by strengthening MTSS, ensuring culturally responsive practices, and improving early academic and behavior supports, is essential to reducing disproportionality and ensuring rightful presence for our Black students. Next slide, please. When we look at high incidence categories, they drive the majority of identification. And what that means is, as we look at the distribution of disability categories for African American students, one of the first thing that stands out is how heavily concentrated the identifications are, meaning specific learning disability, autism, and other health impairment together account for nearly 3/4 of all Black students with IEPs. And this data are similar really across students with disabilities in California. We also see meaningful numbers of Black students identified with intellectual disability and emotional disability or emotional disturbance, categories that have long been associated with disproportionality and bias assessment practices nationwide. These patterns really remind us of why culturally responsive evaluation, trauma-enforced approaches, and robust MTSS systems are essential. So as we know, accurate identification must always be rooted in equitable practices, and the data show that we still have work to do to ensure that our African American and Black students are not misidentified and they receive the right services at the right time. Next slide, please. So when we look at our post-secondary outcomes for African American students by disabilities, this is kind of a lot of data. But what I want you to note is, as we look at the outcomes, one of the most important things to note is there are patterns are very similar of what we see across other racial and ethnic groups in California. And what indicator 14 is for state reporting purposes, it represents the number of students enrolled in post-secondary school. So after they graduate, do they go to college, any kind of college? 14B is the number of students competitively employed, which means paid employment, or are they in higher ed or both. And 14C we look at the number of students either that are competitively employed, they're enrolled in some type of post-secondary work or training programs. And this is really important as it gives accountability to our districts to make sure we're preparing our students for life after high school. So the highest numbers appear in categories like SLD, or specific learning disability, and autism, which also aligns with our statewide trends. It tells us overall that African American or Black students are demonstrating post-secondary and employment outcomes that mirror the broader population of students with disabilities. Again, we're making growth. We need to really work with our LEAs to prepare our students for life after high school. And it's also just important to note that the response rate for the distribution across all these areas for African American and Black students follow the same trajectory we see for other ethnic groups. And what that means is that our data is reliable. So as far as the number of responses we're receiving from our African American and Black students post-high school is similar to the numbers of students we have in high school. So that's just really talking about the reliability of our data. Next slide, please. So this talks about exit results and outcomes for our students with disabilities. And most of our students who are Black or African American are graduating with a diploma. When we look at exit outcomes, that is a key area of strength, and the majority of our students with disabilities who are Black or African American, over 4,000 graduate with a regular high school diploma. And you know that opens up a lot more opportunities for life after high school. The strongest diploma earning subgroup includes our SLD students, or students with a specific learning disability, orthopedic impairments, autism, and emotional disability. Again, although we see improvement in the data, we know we have a lot more work to do. I also want to highlight, we also see meaningful numbers in students earning alternate diplomas and certificates, particularly students who have intellectual disability and autism. And these data remind us that there are multiple pathways to a diploma, and that is essential. And our African American and Black students, like all students, benefit when we offer flexible, individualized routes to complete that high school diploma based on IEP goals and transition plans. The next point I want to show is about dropout rates, and the dropout data show areas where we must intensify intervention, particularly with our Black and African American students, our students with SLD, autism, ED, our emotionally disabled students, and orthopedic impairments. This group accounts really for the highest number of students leaving school without completing diploma requirements. And it emphasizes the need for early behavior supports, mental health connections, stronger transition planning, especially grades 9 through 12. And it really takes that whole child approach to ensure our student success. And just overall, importantly, the overall pattern of our exiting data, our diplomas, our certificates, and our dropout rates tells us that our African American and Black students with disabilities are navigating high school pathways that largely reflect statewide trends for students with disabilities. We are continuing to focus on closing the achievement gaps and strengthening equitable supports. And again, I know I've said this before, we know we have come so far, but we have so much further to go. And we're looking forward to our LEAs to continue this focus on improving outcomes for our students with disabilities and our students of disabilities of color. So now that we're grounded ourselves in the statewide data for students with disabilities, specifically our students of color, it is important to consider how California is responding with strong evidence-based instructional practices. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Bonnie, who will walk us through the state's comprehensive approach to literacy and biliteracy and how it supports all learners. So thank you very much. Bonnie?
Thank you, Rachel. And having worked in special education in the area of special education for many years, I really appreciate the data and the depth of explanation that you provided. It's clear California still has work to do, but we are on a trajectory that is pointed in the right direction. And as Rachel just noted, I'm going to actually turn it over to Nancy Brenelson, Statewide Literacy Co-Director, to walk us through the how.
Thank you, Bonnie. I now want to focus more specifically on what we are doing in literacy and biliteracy. California has a statement of our approach to literacy and biliteracy. And State Superintendent Thurman's Reading by Third Grade and Beyond initiative aims to ensure literacy and biliteracy for all students in California, including those who are in special education, and in particular today, focusing on Black students. But improving student achievement requires a comprehensive approach to literacy and biliteracy. Comprehensive and coherent systems at the state level, at the LEA or local educational agency level, and at the school site. Our statement of our approach includes California's approach to literacy and biliteracy builds on decades of educational research applicable to our culturally and linguistically rich and diverse student population, including the science of reading, literacy, and the science of learning and development. California's intentional approach to literacy promotes carefully sequenced initial instruction, appropriate practice and reinforcement, intervention as necessary, and meaningful application in English language arts, English language development, and literacy in all content areas. It values equally the development of knowledge and skills in each area of the language arts and their use across disciplines, including world languages based on students' identified assets and assessed needs. This approach recognizes the critical importance of ensuring that all students have access to joyful, motivating, linguistically and culturally affirming, and developmentally appropriate literacy experiences that lead to strong content knowledge and effective communication skills. Finally, California's approach to literacy and biliteracy promotes evidence-based instruction that teaches foundational literacy skills, print concepts, phonological, phonemic awareness, phonics and word recognition, and fluency, alongside oral language development, vocabulary, comprehension, writing, speaking, and listening skills. Integrated and designated English language development instruction are incorporated for identified English learner students, and opportunities for development of biliteracy are provided for all. Students with reading difficulties and students with exceptional needs receive supplemental and intensified academic supports to maximize their learning. The learning progress and literacy outcomes for all students are carefully monitored and prioritized within a system of instruction, curriculum, and assessment that is coherent and effective. So laying out what it is that we intend to do in literacy and biliteracy, we can look at what we need to create as a system. This is a diagram of our comprehensive approach to move the needle in student learning in all areas. Today, we're going to focus on literacy. At the center, best first instruction with guidance, materials, and formative and summative assessments. Adults doing planning and development, site planning, leadership, educator preparation, teachers who are in university or other programs to be credentialed, and professional learning and coaching. And for students, tiered supports for learning, screening, diagnostic, and progress monitoring assessments, and acceleration and intervention. So we heard a lot about the initiatives that we have had in the last several years to support literacy instruction and learning across the board. You have a handout that is being dropped, a link is being dropped into the chat of these various state initiatives. But organized yet another way, you can see that in each of these categories, we have had a lot of funding and several initiatives. Site planning, leadership support in the Literacy Coaches and Reading Specialist Grant, our new literacy legislation addresses administrator credentialing. There have been many changes to educator preparation, and there are additional changes coming with AB 1454. Professional learning and coaching. Look at all of the grants that we have had and the opportunities. But it's important to package all of this within a system that makes sense. Our instructional guidance starts with our standards that go all the way back to 2010, 2012 for ELD, our preschool transitional learning foundations, transitional kindergarten learning foundations, and our ELA ELD framework back to 2014, which is still a guiding document for us. But since then, we've had so many others that are important in informing our work. And there'll be a bit more about that toward the end of our session today. Movement and instructional materials. Look, there's a 2026 follow-up adoption for more materials, and then formative and summative assessments. Lastly, we see, not lastly, but continuing on in assessment, English language proficiency assessments for students identified as English learners. And then tiered supports. So within a system, a multi-tiered system of supports, we see all children being served, all students being served, including those with disabilities, including students of all different groups. And those include assessments and acceleration and intervention. So this is our system. Our recent investments have significantly strengthened our literacy system, and student performance is showing increases as Bonnie outlined for you. The task now is to support school districts and schools as they strengthen their systems and to support their students to achieve in literacy, and importantly, our Black and African American students. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Bonnie to introduce our first panel.
Thank you, Nancy. And I'm actually going to turn it over to Deputy McGee, who is going to walk through this with our districts.
Thank you for that, Nancy and Bonnie. And I just want to say, again, you should be here. You know, we're going to treat this like a family gathering. So please, all the knowledge that's being dropped, if you have questions, please use the Q&A function. Don't be shy, ask questions. Even if you have suggestions that you would like us to look at the Department of Education based on what you're hearing today, please put those in the Q&A. Like I said, we're going to treat this like a family style gathering, so we do want to hear from you all as well. I want to say thank you to Dr. Heenan as well, because to me, you guys, she dropped some knowledge. She highlighted the data pertaining to the over-identification of Black students in the special education program, and then highlighted some strategies and some techniques that can be used to support those students. And I believe that Dr. Heenan and her division will be coming back to us soon to do a webinar based on what Dr. Roberson stated. All of our divisions and people at the CDE will be supporting Black student achievement by putting on a webinar. Dr. Heenan also called out the data and the need to focus on Black students. And so that's very important for us to really look at. And then she showed us that exit data, right? So you could talk about children who are dropping out or being pushed out. And I believe I also heard Dr. Heenan mention restorative practices, stronger transition planning for students. Those are things that need to be looked at. Before we jump in with Pittsburgh Unified, who's going to talk to us about some of the strategies they use, I do want to call out these statewide investments that Dr. Glover Wood mentioned as well. We have the Genius Initiative, which is being hosted by our 3 equity leads in the state of California, who are offering Tier 1 training. That means anyone can sign up. Please either Google the Genius Initiative, or I believe we're going to drop it in the chat, and that could be in our resources. However, it's something you all really need to look at, as well as CASA, the California Association of African American Superintendents and Administrators, along with CCEE, the California Collaborative for Educational Excellence, host a variety of workshops and statewide professional development that you can look into. And the last thing, if I could take a quick moment of personal privilege and say, I was able to visit our California School for the Deaf today in Fremont. And these literacy strategies that you saw, that you've explored already with Bonnie and Nancy, the California School for the Deaf, they're already implementing some of these literacy strategies where children are learning American Sign Language and English language. So I learned a lot about that today, and I just want to say thank you and hats off to our interpreters who are here supporting us today. Okay, I think I'm in trouble because I took too much time for my personal privilege, but we want to really now bring on our experts. We want to say thank you to Pittsburgh Unified School District for joining us, and we're going to ask them to turn on their cameras and come off of mute. We have Dr. J.C. Farr, Shelly Velasco, and Jennifer Clark, who are here with us today. So let me see if they're joining me. There we go. I see them popping on. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. I was getting a little lonely up here, but again, you guys joined me right on time, so thank you. So we have some questions that we asked our school districts to support us with this important topic because they're doing some very great work. And as we mentioned, part of the Black Student Achievement Task Force, Black Student Achievement Platform, is to really ask LEAs to highlight work that they're doing. And so the focus that Pittsburgh had is leveraging restorative practices and other evidence-based practices to improve literacy outcomes for Black and African American students with disabilities. So the first question that we asked was describe your district's journey to improve literacy outcomes for Black and African American students. What specific progress are you seeing? What are the contributing factors? Also, what strategies have proven most effective in meeting the needs of Black students with disabilities? And how has this reduced disproportionality within your district? So we'll start off with those two questions. And I believe either Dr. Farr or Ms. Velasco are going to take control of these slides so I don't mess anything up. And I'm going to go off camera and let you guys take over. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. J.C. Farr. I'm here with Ms. Shelley Velasco and Jennifer Clark, and we are so proud to represent our work here in Pittsburgh Unified School District. We like to take a systemic approach to this work. It is a coordination between our school board, who creates the policy, our superintendent, Janet Schultz, who helps to form and shape the vision, and then us as, boots on the ground and the people who, help move that vision forward in collaboration with our site principals, our teachers, our scholars, and our community. So I would like to say that in order for there to be an improvement and a sustainable improvement, things must be aligned. Policies, procedures, protocols, and practices must all be aligned and geared towards improving outcomes for African American students. And I don't think I have access to move the slide forward, so I'm just going to ask you to do so. Just a little bit about our district. We're here in the East Bay. There's approximately 10,700 students here in Pittsburgh Unified School District. We have a significant percentage of English learners, over 25%, approximately 11% of students with disabilities, a high percentage of socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and 15% African American. And one of the things that for me as an educator that I heard when I came into Pittsburgh Unified School District was this idea of disproportionality and where we sat in terms of being overrepresented, as the previous presenter talked about, in terms of our African American students being in special education for both other health impairment and emotional disturbance. And so, we had to take a tough look at our system and, try to identify root causes, but then also be intentional about the strategies that we would use to support exiting disproportionality. And I like to report that due to our efforts, we are no longer in disproportionality to all of the activities and everything that we engaged in throughout the time that I've been here in Pittsburgh Unified School District, which is 3 years, and even before that. And so we had multiple strategies that we implemented, including individual learning plans, where we worked with our scholars and helped them to develop goals, and the supports, behavioral analysis to ensure that we were providing the appropriate interventions for our scholars, and then an intentional focus on phonemic awareness and instruction. And Ms. Velasco will talk more about our, approach to literacy in terms of, developing our strength in that area to move outcomes and improve the outcomes for African American students. And then, most recently, we're working on sustainability, and we're doing so in through using our equity walkthroughs, just to increase the amount of people who are responsible for this work, distributing the leadership and making sure that all of our educators are involved in supporting changing outcomes for African American students. Next slide for me. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Velasco, and she's going to talk about some of our literacy strategies that we have utilized to support the development of African American youth.
Thank you, Dr. Farr. Good afternoon, everyone. I know that it's 4 o'clock now as we're getting closer to Christmas break, and this is tough. So I want to share some of the work that we're continuously working on. We're not there yet, but this is a bit about our journey. As Dr. Farr shared, we were identified as being disproportionate. And so through that work, we really had to do some deep root cause analysis about why our African American students were being identified disproportionately to the other students in our district. That included a deep dive in data. That included some empathy interviews with parent groups, teacher groups, for us to take a really internal look at our practices in the classroom, what parents were feeling, what students were feeling, and that's really important. It's not one of those things, if you compare it to weight gain, for example, right? And those yoga pants and those sweatpants allow you to be like, we're still good, we're okay. This is one of those things where the pants don't fit anymore. And that's a problem, right? And we had to do something about it. And so to that end, we began our work with Ascendancy Solutions and Dr. Mildred Brown and her team to uncover some of the things that were going wrong. And so to that end, we began to really look at our data. And you heard some of the experts ahead of me, Dr. Glover Woods, talk about that data piece as being really pivotal in turning our work around with our African American scholars. We began using Dibbles and Acadience as it kind of evolved with our scholars over the last 7 years. And to that end, we use it a bit differently. We don't use it as just a screener. We use that screener 3 times over the course of every single school year. We use it from kindergarten through 3rd grade because we know that learning to read doesn't end at 2nd grade. So we use that literacy screener to help us identify the gaps in our daily instruction. So again, we are giving that screener 3 times per year. We're looking at our data, seeing what it asks us to do. So we are literally pulling our African American scholar data and we're seeing where the gaps exist. To fill in those gaps, the next strategy that we use across the board is called universal access. And that is a sacred time at each of our school sites, 30 minutes a day, where we are intentionally pulling our groups of students on that data, right? And providing instruction to meet their needs. So whether that's a long, short vowel skills, right? Whether that's phonemic awareness skills, whatever the data suggests, we're working on that skill set specifically in small group instructional time to ensure that we're addressing our students' need. And then we're checking, right? As any good assessment system, right? We're checking midway through the year. We're actually progress monitoring before we get to midway through the year, because only addressing once per year doesn't show us whether our instruction is improving those outcomes for our scholars. And what we found very quickly is when we're doing that universal access time with fidelity, our scholars are making great strides in their learning to read progress. The other piece of that is our district has invested heavily in coaching. We have a cabinet and a superintendent who believes in coaching models. So we have at each of our elementary sites, or had at each of our elementary sites, 8 coaches. So each site had a coach. That coach came in, provided elbow coaching, provided testing and assessment, provided data meetings with each of our teachers to look at scholars, to group scholars, to look at what resources we can use differently to ensure our scholars were meeting, their needs were being met as they were progressing along the learning to read continuum. So that elbow coaching, that data reviewing, more became not about what we expect, but what about what we inspect. Right? And so that means that our coaches are in the classrooms. Our entire district, as Dr. Farr talked about, we're doing walkthroughs with our leadership site teams, with our district teams. So we are seeing what is happening in our classrooms. Finally, we use professional development. We have a week of welcome that we offer to all new and returning teachers on our staff to ensure we're getting those science of reading professional developments ahead of walking into a school year. So that's another strategy of professional development that we use to affect outcomes for our African American scholars. And then, as Dr. Farr said, our individual learning plans, or our ILPs, with our African American scholars, which were individual meetings with site principal, with scholar, with parent, to talk explicitly about the needs of our scholars who weren't performing. And those strategies have worked. If you go to our next slide. So the successes and impact of the work that we've seen. I'm, happy to report that our Black and African American scholars have outperformed all of the other groups in our system, especially on phonics and phonemic awareness tests. And that is attributed to the hard work of our teachers who are in our classrooms daily. We have a rock star group of teachers who are doing the do every day. They're diligent, they do it with fidelity, and ultimately the reason for this success. Our professional coaching model has really helped to, as we know, our teachers, if you got a teaching credential before the last 5 years, talk nothing about the science of reading. We were given one night of phonics and one night of phonemic awareness, and we were baptized reading teachers. And we know that's not enough. So nobody's gone back and gotten a credential. So our coaches have worked diligently to provide that information around how do we teach reading? What's most effective? What strategies are we using? So again, if your cabinet and if your folks at that highest level aren't investing in coaching, encourage that, because that's really important in the success that we've had with our scholars. And then the other piece has been we've invested in culturally responsive materials in our elementary schools. Ethnic studies has been huge in our middle schools and high schools, but our littles need to be able to read and see books that look like them, sound like them, and we've got to use culturally responsive strategies in our schools so that they're engaged in the work and they see themselves as a vital part of the community. It's been another strategy. And then finally, our family communication has been pivotal. They're another piece to this. We've talked about our scholars, we've talked about cabinet walkthroughs, and our families are that ultimate piece. We've done a number of meetings this year. We've met with over 200 families to learn how to read those DIBELS reports. What do those even mean? What do they look like? And what are some supports that they can do at home? So this fidelity that we have to our assessment, to our universal access time, to working with our families have truly helped ingrain the science of reading in our system. In addition, it has reduced that disproportionality of our students being referred for special education assessment in our school sites. Next slide, please. Needless to say, there's still some challenges. Challenges that I'm sure that you all deal with as well, and we're still working around. That B word, budget, right? That right now we're struggling with that, and we had to decrease, unfortunately, from 8 coaches, 1 at each site, to 4. So sharing those and not getting that personalized one-on-one attention and that guide on the side in some cases to help really say, come look at what I'm doing, give me some feedback. That's been one of our newest challenges. As we look at our data and examine, our African American scholars still struggle the most with reading comprehension of informational text. It's so nice when we have this information to be able to target it specifically. And finally, many African American scholars enroll in our district already with IEPs. So while we not have assessed and done that, they've come in with those IEPs. So those are a few of the challenges that we are still working with and working to remediate in our district.
So can we keep rolling, because Jennifer Clark is here, and I know that one of the questions that you wanted us to address was regarding restorative practices. And I think that is, equal contributor to just the way. So I don't know if you want to point out the question or just allow us to kind of talk about it.
No, you got it. Please keep going,
All
because
right.
we know that restorative practices is important. And if Miss Clark is about to tell us something about it, please jump in there.
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jennifer Clark. I am the Director of Student Services here, proud Director of Student Services here in Pittsburgh Unified School District. I've been on this journey in this district for over 22 years. I took on this position understanding and knowing the disproportionality that lives in our district around our African-American students. And so all the great things that we have been doing with increasing student outcomes, what happens to those students that are not in the class to receive that engagement, to receive that literacy work? So we have had to spend a lot of time focusing and refocusing on our restorative justice work that we've done in our district. We do have a proud and supportive board who implemented a restorative justice resolution some years ago. We had restorative justice facilitators in our secondary schools, and their work was really around tier 2 and tier 3 response to harm. And that was where it was living. And so a couple of years ago, we really had to unpack, how do we get to the lower level? How do we get to tier 1? How do we focus on creating environments for our classrooms, for our schools, our libraries, and every capacity of our schools? So we have focused more or less on building environments that are welcoming, creating opportunities to implement tier 1 across the schools, across the classrooms, focusing on connecting with the students, creating opportunities for relationships, building those relationships in the classroom, which would definitely increase the classroom time for our African American students so that they're not being pushed out on a regular basis, that those classroom communities are built with restorative practices. So our journey now is on Restorative Practices 2.0, where we included lots of workshops for our teachers and created a district team of trainers to train our other staff at their sites on community building and restorative circles in the classroom, giving more opportunities for the teachers and the staff to create those environments that are welcoming and engaging, so students will feel seen, will feel heard, and will stay in class, and give the teachers an opportunity to continue to engage with their class, all their classroom students. We know that restorative practices are embedded in the MTSS. It is the umbrella. It's a part of our SEL, and we have that in all of our classrooms. In elementary, we have those morning meetings that are created in the beginning part of the classroom day. And we've really implored upon our principals to ensure that the site are creating and carving out the time in their day for the students to receive those times in the classroom, that it's okay to push aside the learning instruction to build those community, push aside the classroom instruction for time, because we need to focus back on building that community. What happened today? How was your weekend? And those teachers having those opportunities to really connect with their students, and those connections really help before they have to correct any type of behaviors. We did spend some time on redoing our discipline matrix to ensure that a lot of our teachers understand that a lot of correction and connection begins in the classroom, and that there are responses that don't necessarily need to have students removed from classrooms. This is a continual work in progress, and we just have to remember to remind our people to come together and connect before we have to correct. And I'm going to say that quite often because that's something that we need to stand by. Next slide, please. So again, we need to strengthen the conditions for learning. I see that there's a typo there, my apology. We want to ensure that in the classroom that the students are there, that their students are being pushed out, intentionally building relationships, the teacher and the students, working on reframing those behaviors. This is a journey for a lot of our adults in the classroom, given that this is a mindset shift that we've had to continually work on with the adults in our district. A lot of our adults have a hard time redirecting behavior in the classroom because it does take away from instructional time, and sometimes it is a little bit easier to have a student removed. So there's been a lot of work, again, around restorative practices, building that community. So that will definitely improve the engagement in the classroom, and that the academic readiness is built within the students. This way, our Black students are participating more in classrooms because they feel a part of the classroom, they feel welcome, they feel like they belong, and that trust is being built with the students and the teacher. And therefore, those students' academic achievements will continue to improve and they will want to thrive. We do know that equity, and it lives in all the work that we do, and we want to make sure that we continue building on our equity. In our district, we're proud to say that we have an equity walkthrough tool that was mentioned earlier, and we're looking at the student experience when we walk through the classroom, seeing if we can identify how the students feel welcome, how the students feel belonging and joy, and that community in the classroom, and looking at through the eyes of our African-American students. What is that student experiencing, and how can we empower the teacher to push on the things that they are doing well? Is there some areas that they can glean and grow, and then start immediately tomorrow? So the walkthroughs that we've been doing has really been helping that student engagement, and for us to see that student experience, and then to build upon that in later walkthrough journeys that we have throughout the district. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier, one of our challenges, and our challenges have been probably for the last 10 years, is behaviors continue to increase. We do see students being pushed out of classroom. One of the behaviors that we see more or less now is more physical as opposed to just being pushed out. I am glad to say that we have been able to take 48900K, disciplining students for willful defiance, out of our district matrix, that we do not suspend those students before the state went to that policy. So I'm proud to say that we've been doing a lot of work on that and other means of correction to address student behaviors, which does absolutely include restorative conversations and restorative circles. But there is that challenge that we do have to move from being punitive to restorative, and creating those opportunities more consistently. That's part of our struggle that we continue to work on, and our trainers that we have building upon community circles will definitely help with that. So we continue to see that as an issue, as well as inconsistent implementation of restorative practices. There is the focus or sometimes mindset where people want to just push it out. I don't have time to take care of that. That's going to take away from my instruction. But we have to remember that we have to continue, that this is not a program. Restorative practices is not a program. These are principles that we need to ensure that we're living by, and that it holds us all accountable for creating that environment and increasing opportunities for students to be a part of the classroom using their voice. And that's some of the work that we continue to move to, because again, many of our teachers sometimes want quick fixes, and sometimes it's warranted. At the same time, those restorative conversations is definitely important. Next slide, and my last slide. So we try to focus everything in equity, as mentioned earlier. My advice is just to stay the course. This is not easy work. Equity is not easy work. We all know that, but this is about access and opportunity for our Black students, and we need to make sure that we are steadfast in that. It's not about being fair. We need to make sure that we don't miss opportunities. And so we have to work on building our adult capacity before we can see long-term change. And again, focusing on connection before correction, and definitely embed restorative practices in your MTSS. We do have great partnerships. I heard it mentioned before with CASA. We do a lot of work with CASA and CCEE, as well as my work with CASWA, and gaining all opportunities that I can share with my staff on professional development, and making sure that restorative practices remains a topic of conversation and discussion in every type of meetings that we have. That's all.
So in summary, and we can pass it on to Inglewood, is having that institutional will As the previous presenters talked about, the theoretical pieces are all there. We all have Chat GPT now. We can, put in how to improve outcomes for African American youth, and you'll get a variety of answers and strategies. But do you have the will, the institutional will, to push through and be unapologetic about changing outcomes for African American youth? I'm proud to be in Pittsburgh, where we are committed to that work. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate with everyone and listen to Inglewood's journey. So thank you all.
Yeah, no, Inglewood is coming up. Inglewood is coming up. We're not done with you all yet, though. But you guys dropped a whole bunch of stuff. So first of all, congratulations to the accomplishment of, not over-identifying Black children and getting out of disproportionality. So congratulations. And I believe I heard some strategies, and I'm going to be challenging everyone on this webinar to really listen and go back to this webinar and look at your strategies. And I think, Ms. Clark, what did you say? You said something, connect before we correct.
Connect before we correct, yes.
And I typed that in, and I'm about to put it on a t-shirt and trademark it. And the reason I'm saying that is because as a principal and a teacher, I didn't realize that I was building relationships. And so when I became a principal, I was one of those that wanted a quick fix. But my school psychologist taught me, she said, the suspension doesn't change that child's behavior. Yeah, it might get that child away from your campus for a day or two. However, that child is going to come back. And once they find out all you can do is suspend them, they're going to wreak havoc. So how do you build the relationship? So Ms. Clark, thank you for talking about that, because my assistant principal, Andrew Strawbridge, created one of the youth courts, and we had children who were tardy to class. And when we had those children go in front of other children, I'm going to tell you, after they did the youth court, those children were running to class. I mean, the bell hadn't rung yet, and they were running to class. But again, that was a restorative practice. So thank you. And then I think I also heard a lot of those strategies. Ms. Velasco, you mentioned Dibbles, not just a screener. We come back to that. And then we're making data-informed decisions. So you all have answered questions about, one, how do you reduce the identification of children into the special education program? But then how do we support them when they're there? And restorative practices, I'm going to tell you, it's harder than a suspension. What you think, Ms. Clark? And I'm going to tell you why.
How to work.
Ms. Clark, let me tell you before you even say anything. The reason being is because when you have to sit in front of somebody you have wronged and you have to talk about it, whoo, if I was a child, I'd say, give me that suspension.
Absolutely.
But now, you're really working, and it really supports with building relationships. So, I thank you guys. Thank you for the work you do. Thanks for that work with Dr. Schultz that you guys are doing. Dr. Farr, the work you're doing, and Ms. Velasco, we appreciate it. Any last words, or maybe let me ask you a quick question, because Bonnie's going to get upset with me because she knows I love to talk. But let me ask you guys a quick question. Tell us in like 37 seconds, what advice would you give? Because Dr. Farr, we heard you talking about aligning systems. We heard you talk about everything has to be in line. So who wants to just come off of mute? 37 seconds. Give us at CDE some advice, and our LEAs. What advice do you have, strategies or partnerships, that you would give to other
Deferring to
LEAs to
Dr.
replicate
Farr.
your success?
No, go ahead, Shelley, take it, please.
37 seconds.
Go ahead, Dr. Farr, you're it.
Okay. I think that alignment is most important, because we had an equity statement, and I think that a lot of districts have equity statements, but are you living your equity statements? Are you putting the policy, the procedures and protocols in place to activate that statement and make it a reality? So I think it starts with having that commitment to the work, right? And not being afraid to articulate that publicly, but then following that up with the practices that are going to help move and make that statement a reality. And so I think if I had to give districts, an advice, think about what are the practices that make your vision, that make your statements actually come alive, and then make sure you're monitoring the progress of those practices that you have chosen.
Great, thank you. That was 37 seconds. I know people probably wanted to give you another 37 seconds so they could hear, but I appreciate you really being here. We appreciate you and your team, and we thank you guys for your knowledge. And we do look forward to seeing you all at the CASA conference and other areas where we can continue to learn from you. There will be some questions that we're going to send to you because people have asked questions specific of you. And so, we'll send that to you and hopefully get those questions and answers out. If not before the winter break, after the winter break. So thank you guys for being here. All right, Dr. Farr, you asked for Inglewood. They're up next, and they got some exciting stuff as well. So let's see if Inglewood does not mind turning on their cameras and coming off of mute to join me on that screen. There we go. I see Dr. Lucas, we got you here, and Mr. Morris. Thank you guys for being here. We appreciate your time, and we want to really talk to you all again. You heard Pittsburgh and the work they're doing, and we know that Inglewood has been engaged in some amazing work too. So again, will you guys describe your district's journey to improve literacy outcomes for Black and African American students? What specific progress and what contributing factors have led to that? So again, you guys, we have Dr. Morris here with us, and we have Dr. Lewis. I'm going to turn it over to you all and turn my camera off so you can take us on your journey.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. McGee. I'll start, and then it really is a journey, and I think that's an important word to mark up front. When we talk about Inglewood's journey, I have to go back to the year 2000, because in the year 2000, Inglewood Unified School District was this district in the state that had the highest test scores for Black, African American, and Latinx students. And so a bunch of unfortunate incidents happened in the district, and test scores and achievement went down and went down and went down from being the real spotlight and highlight of the state. The district took some steps backwards. Dr. Lucas and I came to Inglewood and said, we really have to turn this around. And we worked together to develop what we call our theory of action. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that theory of action so that you kind of understand the context of the district. Back in the year 2000, 25 years ago, when Inglewood was one of the highest performing school districts in the state, they had some pieces in place. When Dr. Lucas and I got here, 3 years ago, we had some schools in CSI. These were schools that really had very, very, very poor levels of academic achievement. Another thing that was said here was it's really important to know your history. So we looked at the history. What was in place 25 years ago? We went out and we talked to the teachers. We focused first on our schools that were in CSI. And we went out and talked to those teachers. And that was really the basis for developing this theory of action. We went and talked to those teachers and said, how come Inglewood was so successful 25 years ago? And it was clear the pieces that were in place. And that's the basis of this theory of action. What was in place that we had to reinstitute in Inglewood? Common reading program, number one. Every school in the district is going to use a common reading program. Second thing that we did, and you'll see it in this theory of action, is we said we're going to have a common curriculum, and we're going to invest in our staff. We went to the schools in CSI and then the following year to all the schools in the district and said to the teachers, we want you to give up a week of your summertime and come to a summer reading institute and really become experts at teaching this reading curriculum. Do you know every single teacher in this district said, bring it on, we're there. Because that's what we used to do when we had California Distinguished School banners at our schools. The teachers said, absolutely. So we began having summer reading institutes for all of the teachers in the district. And when I said, invest in your people, provide support to the teachers, second thing we put in place, very similar to what Pittsburgh taught us, literacy coaches. We put literacy coaches at all of our schools. Why are those literacy coaches there? They're there to be that at elbow support for teachers in the classroom to give them support to become excellent teachers of reading and literacy. Second thing that we did, part of what happened in Inglewood 25 years ago, we said, we're going to use the Dibbles assessments, or we're going to have assessments every 6 to 8 weeks of our students. We're going to take a look at how students are doing, because we don't want to wait until they fail to provide intervention or extra support. So we have those assessments in place. We decided in our district we were going to focus on 2 aspects of the assessments so it would be clear what we were after, and those were fluency and comprehension. We pay close attention to those assessments because that's part of what teachers need in order to get better. What we did with those assessments is we said, oh, by the way, in addition to that, we have to have intervention. When students aren't being successful, something has to be done. We don't need to wait until students fail. We call them accelerated learning teachers that focus on the early grades to provide additional extra support for students who are falling behind or may not meet the expectation at that 6 or 8 week assessment. So we have intervention in place. The next thing that we made sure is we have to have leadership. You have to have strong, capable leadership. We require our principals to go to those reading institutes so that they become knowledgeable. You can't evaluate what you don't really know. And so our principals have become proficient in really understanding what's the instruction I should be seeing when I visit a classroom? How can I be there to support the teachers? So let me summarize it. And then Dr. Lucas, our amazing assistant superintendent of instruction, is going to talk through a little bit of the data that we're beginning to see. And once again, I want to point out our scores aren't anywhere where we want them to be, but we are moving in the right direction under Dr. Lucas' leadership this year. For the first time in 10 years, almost every grade level, English language arts and math and science, we're seeing test score improvement. And it's because of this theory of action. And so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Lucas, and she'll kind of run through the data a little bit. I want to point out before Dr. Lucas starts just one thing. Those literacy coaches have been instrumental in the improvement that's happened in Inglewood. Why? They're in the classrooms. They're working alongside the teacher. We've made it very clear they're not evaluative. They are there as part of the professional development to support our teachers. Dr. Lucas.
Thank you so much, Dr. Morris. And I have to take a moment of privilege and call out your extraordinary leadership too. It takes a team that recognizes the importance of centering students and their teachers, and every other staff members in support of that relationship. And you have modeled that in every action you've taken. I want to also commend Pittsburgh Unified. Listening to your story was extremely inspiring and validating. We shared very similar themes. So it was great hearing from you. To Dr. Morris's point, I'm going to quickly move through the data. This can be looked up on our dashboard. And he was spot on. We have a lot of work to do. We want to be very clear and transparent about that. As Pittsburgh Unified said, we're on a journey. And our journey is going to end in extraordinary achievement for every single student in our district. Today, we are talking about our African American students. We're sharing the last 3 years of CASP data with you today, though we have done a 6-year analysis. What we're very proud to share is that our trend lines for all 3 assessed subject areas are on the upward trend for all groups of students. While we call out African American students today, you can see that our literacy scores are moving up at a statistically relevant pace. And that's through intention. And we'll talk about our strategies in just a moment. And this has been for the last 6 years. We move on to math for African American students. Same thing. We've experienced a steady jump. To Dr. Morris's point, the district did suffer setbacks that, we're not going to get into today. But we did not let those setbacks stop us. We focused on our students. We focused on their families and their needs. in order to move their student achievement. Then we moved to science for African American students, and you can see these jumps that we're making, but they're not jumps. It's a trajectory that we're on. So we can pretty well predict where we should be next year based on these trend lines and based on our internal assessment systems. Now, I want to go back. There's an area that we really need to focus on, and that's the suspension rate. Pittsburgh talked about the importance of restorative practice and ensuring that young people are in class, and we know how disproportionately suspensions impact African American students, and we are not immune to that. Approximately 1/3 of Inglewood Unified student population is African American. So these numbers are very significant. And this is an area of need for us. On our dashboard for this year, we increased in every area, stayed the same in 2, but this is the one area we went down in. So we want to be transparent about the fact that indeed we're on a journey. And indeed we take this data extremely seriously, and we don't wait until the end of the year for it to come out. And I'll get to that in just a moment. And then with our chronic absenteeism, we were extraordinarily intentional about ensuring that our African American students were in school. So you can see we had a significant drop in our chronic absenteeism for our African American students last year. Again, this resulted from some very intentional strategies and efforts that I'll get into in just a moment. We did want to set the context for how our strategies are impacting our students' data as measured by the assessments we're sharing today before we got into our strategies. And here we go. Now, in the chat, I put a link, if you're interested, to a document that we use to govern how we interact with all of our students. In large part, this document resulted from the stories, the feedback that we were getting from our African American students. We've been extraordinarily intentional about listening to them, having monthly student meetings. Our students are on student councils at each of their schools, including our African American students, and we do not shy away from conversations related to race and inequities in pursuit of their liberation. So we leverage equity strategies with a focus on liberation, because we do see literacy as a path to liberation for our African American students for all of the reasons that the presenters before me shared. So this document that hopefully you can access in the chat speaks to some general principles that I do want to speak to because they ground us. They nest our students and their families in what we are pursuing as a beloved community. And these characteristics are meant and well communicated to the organization. And they're meant just for that reason, to create a safe, emotionally and physically safe environment for our students, where they want to be in school, where they thrive in school, and where they look forward to being there every day. Those principles include radical inclusion and dignity, relational trust and shared responsibility among students, staff, and families, equity and justice in practice. And I'll get into that in just a moment. A focus on the collective well-being of all students, staff, and families, a shared vision and participatory leadership throughout the organization so that our organization operates as a community that's surrounding our students instead of a top-down organization. And that's a very important concept. And then again, I mentioned this already, learning as a tool for liberation. And that we are, again, I really appreciated Pittsburgh Unified. We are absolutely unapologetic about calling out the need to support our African American students. We all know that sometimes when you do that, you get the questions, why? Why are you doing this? And we always ground the answer in the data. The data does not lie. The data dictates the path that you should take. And so we leverage the data to make the case for our focus on all students. We do have 4 focus groups of students: African American students, Hispanic students, English learners, and students with special needs. And we have the data to back up those choices. And we do not make apology for focusing on those groups of students. And in so doing, we get the results that we've gotten. And that pretty much closes the case on any debate as to why we're focusing on our African American students. We have tiered the support. I'm going to drop a link to another resource that we use in the district called our Big Book. But at the school site level, and all of these strategies are nested in our theory of action. So Dr. Morris spoke about high quality instructional materials. Our teachers, as is the case in many, if not all districts, are central to the selection of our instructional materials. Obviously, educational services and Dr. Morris, our superintendent, county administrator, highly involved in the selection of these materials. And we were very thoughtful about ensuring that the materials reflected our student population and that they honored the incredible intellectual capacity of our students, that they challenged them, that they're rigorous and meet their needs where they're at right now and in the future. The aligned professional development, we conducted an audit of our professional development. If it didn't align with our core instructional materials, it was out. And that took a lot of editing. It took a lot of conversation, debate, but we remain true to that. And when you visit our classrooms now, our teachers are operating off of core materials that they selected in conjunction with district office. And that coherence across the organization has led to clarity and focus. And those two things are essential in moving any instructional program forward, as we all know. Dr. Moore spoke to the common periodic assessments, so I won't repeat that. I do want to emphasize that as a district for the last 3-4 years, we have been relentless about our PLC work. Our teachers, our educators work in collaborative teams where the 4 PLC questions guide their conversations. We have been very, very, very committed to that process. We focus on the needs of individual students, small group instruction, how we're leveraging our MTSS framework, which I'm going to provide a link to in just a moment, to fuel those conversations. We've provided dedicated time to teachers to do that through Bank Time Tuesday. Our students are released a little later on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, so that on Tuesdays, their teachers, counselors, nurses, psychologists can meet and talk about students and their needs individually and by focus group. I did put a link to what we call our big book in the chat. In that book, we highlight all of the major frameworks that are at play in Inglewood Unified School District, and that document has allowed for coherence and consistency across the organization. At school sites, we also ensure the wraparound services. Dr. Morris worked very hard with school sites to ensure that we secured the Community Schools Grant so that we can provide the services that our students need as whole people. One of the things I neglected to mention, and this is incredibly important, our theme for the school district as it relates to our students is meeting every student's need by name and by need. So not only do we focus on our focus groups of students, we focus on them as individuals because we're talking about African American and Black students. But as we all know, no one person is one identity. Our students are complex human beings, universes unto themselves. We adore them. We are fascinated by them. And we want to make sure that we're honoring their fullness as human beings. And so in doing that, it necessitates wraparound services. It necessitates looking at them as individuals and what they need academically and social emotionally. And we're very, very intentional about that. And the community schools work has played a huge part in that. Another practice that we've implemented for the last couple of years are data summits. Data teams from every single school site in the district meet every other month in their school PLCs. So we have 11 schools in the district, 2 groups of TK8 schools. So they're broken into 2 PLCs, and the high school group. They bring their data from the latest assessments. They huddle in a room together. They challenge each other. They ask each other questions. They share strategies. And I cannot describe the synergy, the magic that happens in those rooms. We know that the work is at the sites. And by facilitating these data summits, we honor that our teachers, our principals, our counselors are the experts on the front line implementing all of this work that we're all working in support of. I really wish you all could see these data summits. We have a handbook that guides these summits that has been revised based on our colleagues' feedback. They have no problem telling us what's working and what's not working, and we really appreciate that. So if you're interested in that, please give Dr. Morris or I an email, and I'm happy to share that out with you. Aligned with the data chats are student data chats. I'm sorry, the data summits are student data chats. I just spoke about the fact that our theme is by student, by name, by need, meeting their needs by their name, knowing them as individuals, in their fullness. So we have rolled out student data chats across the district. We continue to work on this. We have a little bit of work to do, but they have been so impactful and empowering for our students. When I was a principal, my second grade teachers came to me and said, Bernadette, we want to try these data chats with our second graders. And they explained to me the process they wanted to roll out. It was incredible. The results were incredible. Our second graders were running up to me on the playground. I was Miss Lucas at the time. I'm in the yellow. Next assessment, and they use the word assessment because we taught it to them. I'm going to be in the green. We're seeing the same impact in Inglewood Unified School District. Our students have a right to know where they stand. Their parents have a right to know that. But oftentimes our students don't know exactly where they're falling. They may not be giving that assessment all their effort because they don't recognize the importance of it. They may have had a bad day or what have you, but if they knew how important these assessments are and what they're meant for, they would be able to approach them differently. And I cannot tell you the impact these student data chats have had. They are meeting our students where they are, and they are honoring them as lifelong learners. Coaching at school sites for at elbow support, as Dr. Moore spoke about, our instructional coaches are absolutely incredible. They formed relationships based on confidentiality and trust that have facilitated teachers feeling comfortable being vulnerable with them as they grow professionally. And we take that very seriously. We administrators in the district don't ask questions of our coaches. We empower them through professional development and resources in their own PLCs. But we protect that relationship between teacher and coach in terms of time and allocation of resources and honoring that confidential piece and that trust piece. Before I move to the next slide, I do want to call out what the cells we have at the bottom. This notion of sawubona, that I see you. I'm going to talk in a moment about the African American Student Summits that we roll out, and we're continuing that this year. I cannot express again how important it was to us, it is to us, that our students know that we see them as whole human beings. Yes, you are an African American student. That means a lot. A lot comes with that, and we know that through experience and through empathy. And we know that you have a lot going on in other areas of your life. You are other identities. And so we see all of that. And we want to operationalize that. We see you and we're responding to seeing you. I already spoke about the idea of the beloved community. I provided a link in the chat to that. And our theme of every student by name and by need. We are relentless about that, and we operationalize that in all of the ways that I just shared. Oh, and I do want to call out that the student that's displayed here is our student board member, Amaya Hazard, and she's a shining example of what we're talking about. At the district level, I just spoke about ICU, how we operationalize that through the beloved community, through the data chats, through the work we do with parents, through data summits. I shared that every month by grade level, span 3, 5, 6, 8, and high school, we meet with our students, representation from every single school, to hear how the work we're doing is impacting them and the feedback that they're giving us to improve our practice in service of them. We share their site data reports with them. The same data charts that we share with our teachers and our principals and the entire organization, our student leaders see that same data in the same format, and they take those charts back to their school sites and share them with their fellow students. Again, empowering them to chart their own course. I'm going to skip the next point because I already spoke to that. The student voice and then acting on it. And we do that through including them in our LCAP development. They are authentically included in the development of the LCAP. They attend the meetings. We take the LCAP development to them just as we do our community meetings, community members through those meetings. And so having them give input on the goals and actions that we have determined has been revelatory. It has really supported us in knowing, is what we're doing, are the strategies that we're implementing actually reaching our students? And they are the first to tell us whether they are or not. showing our students we are accountable to them. We show them the budgets from their different schools. We ask the student leaders at each school to meet with their principals around the school budgets and the SIPSAs and how those budgets are being leveraged in support of them. We do the same thing at the district level with our students and with our parents so they can not only give us feedback on what we have budgeted, because we all know that your budget reflects what you value, but also share with them what are the metrics we're using that these resources, these budgeted resources, how are we measuring their impact on you as students? And I wish that you all could attend some of these meetings. The questions our students ask are absolutely amazing. You would think they were 30, 40, 50, 60-year-olds, the depth and the nuance of their questions. We do, as many districts do, have African American student summits where we pull them together. And we do invite all students. Our students know that they're geared, this summit in particular is geared toward African American students. But we also know that their colleagues, their peers at the school site play a huge role in student life. So if there's students who do not identify as African American who want to attend the summit, they attend. They hear about issues impacting their African American and Black peers, and they join in the conversation. They start to understand that lived experience of our African American students. They also hear from African American adults in the organization and community members and partners about what our experience has been as African American adults, and hearkening back to when we were their age and what that journey was like. Them hearing our story, our students have shared with us, has been extremely compelling, and us listening to them and their stories and their lived experience and our experiences in our schools has been so important to them. They feel heard, they feel valued, they feel loved. And this is how we want them to feel when they come to school. We do roll out an African American student survey, parent climate survey every single year. So we can gauge how are these practices impacting our students and their families. We received reports from our African American families that they weren't feeling respected when they came into school sites. We have to take pause on something like that and ask what's contributing to that. Then after we receive the data from this survey, then talking and having focus groups with African American parents so that we can truly understand their experience and then respond accordingly. And then our leaders guiding that work. Dr. Morris talked about how important leadership development is in Inglewood Unified. Again, listening to their voice so that we can support their professional development in service to African American students. One thing that I didn't have listed here, though Dr. Morris asked me to put it here, so forgive me. We started an author series last year, and we have authors come to the district who reflect our student population. These are published New York Times bestselling authors. So we're intensifying the love of literacy for our African American and Latinx students, while showing them that their stories, their experience are not only valued but sought after. We want our students to be writers. We want to pick up novels that they wrote in 1, 2, 5, 10 years that are best-selling books on the New York Times list. So in doing that, and we've had so many students come to us and talk about this, having these authors who look like our students has opened up a world for them that they did not know existed. The book our students are reading for our January author series is called The Black Kids. We have a book coming up. The author had to cancel for personal reasons, but she will be joining us in the spring. I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. And so these authors are standing in front of them, sharing their experiences, and the impact has just been otherworldly.
Yeah.
I know we're running out of time. I could go on for 2 more hours, so I'm going to stop.
Look, Dr. Lucas, I know because you and Dr. Morris, like Pittsburgh, like I said, again, I get in trouble with Bonnie a lot, but I might have to invite you guys to have your own webinar. But like you said, Sawubona and Sikona, I see you too, right? And that's very important that we do this for our family and our students. And I'm not sure who's sharing, but maybe they could take the slides down real quick as we wrap up with Inglewood. But, Dr. Lewis, your wish is my command. You said you wish that we can view these data summits. Send me an invite, please, because I will be down there. So, Dr. Morris, I'll be emailing. And I know Bonnie is right in the neighborhood. So, let us know when the data summits are happening so we can try and get down there and observe what you're doing. And just like Pittsburgh Unified gave me a t-shirt, I coined this too, Dr. Lewis, so don't try and take it. You said data does not lie. The data dictates the path we should take. So I'm putting that on the t-shirt as well. I've already trademarked it because those are important things, especially when you talk about like you mentioned, we're here talking about Black students. However, these practices that you all have highlighted are good for all children. You also said something, Dr. Morris. I don't know if you said it. No, excuse me. Let me say that again. I don't know if you said it, but you said we do not need to wait until students fail. And that struck me so powerfully because I was at a teacher event, CEDAN, CEDAN, and there was a parent from a district that I worked in, and she said, "Didn't you do the African American student office?" I said, "Yes." And she said just what you said, Dr. Moore. She was looking for tutoring for her child, and they told her, "Well, we need to wait till he gets a D and an F." She said, "No." She said, "He's at a C. He needs tutoring now so he doesn't get there." So those strategies that you and Dr. Lucas have highlighted are very important work for our Black students. So Dr. Lucas, Dr. Morris, 37 seconds. What do you want to close with? Anything or what you want? Dr. Morris, 37. Well, you're on mute still, Dr. Morris. That's part of your 37 seconds.
Oops.
What you want to close with?
Yeah, no problem. I'll close with actually something very wise that Vice President Glover Wood said at the beginning about be intentional, have clear expectations, invest in your people, and pursue it relentlessly. We cannot give up. And I think when our board vice president said, "Be intentional," well, man, that hit the mark for us.
Beautiful. No, beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And again, Dr. Glover Woods is always dropping knowledge. You guys heard from Vanessa Ejike, our student board member, and Dr. Roberson, who all three of them are just electrifying. And then when you add on what you all discussed with us and explored and what Pittsburgh did, that was great. And let's be mindful. This webinar started at 3 p.m. on a Thursday during the winter holiday time. We had about 200 people on there, and we purposefully did the webinar later in the afternoon because we did want to encourage teachers to attend. And we know that teachers were, still teaching, wrapping up their day, but we received emails like, "Is this going to be recorded? I'm teaching at that time." Yes, it's recorded. And I know Bonnie is going to work to get it sent out and all that type of stuff. So Bonnie, let's say thank you again to Inglewood, and let's say thank you again to Pittsburgh. And then Bonnie, you want to get us closed out and then let me know how I can support as well. And then Bonnie, and again, I always do this, I always call on somebody, but I keep talking. I do want to say thank you to the folk who attended today's webinar as well, because this is a commitment. And there were some tough questions in the Q&A. So please, you guys, add some more questions to the Q&A. Inglewood will be graciously answering them. Pittsburgh will be answering them, as well as CDE. You all ask some questions, and we're going to get the answers to those questions. But some people said, Bonnie, they said, "Well, how do you still talk about African American or Black students or Latino students when what's happening at the federal level right now says we can't do that?" There are ways that you can support your children who are in need. I think Dr. Lucas said it. The data does not lie. So you use that data to capture the children you want to look at and support. And again, just because you're supporting those children does not mean you're not supporting others. So we'll get you some information. Superintendent Thurman really believes in the work and really supports the work. So you all please continue. So Bonnie, you better put me on mute. I don't know if Joy can mute me or not because I'll keep talking. I'll mute myself. Bonnie, you got it.
Well, thank you so much for moderating both of those discussions and for Inglewood and Pittsburgh for all that you have to share. I promise I'll take it easy on you later, Will. But no, seriously, thank you so much. Please look through the slide deck that we shared. There are a number of resources, including information regarding screening, regarding our professional learning, regarding other events that are upcoming. And I would point you to part 2 on January 29th, where we will have Dr. Julie Washington and Dr. Tracy Whedon on to talk more about how do we improve literacy outcomes for our Black and African American students. Thank you so much for being with us, and we appreciate your time. And until January 29th, thank you.